Patrick.
Hey, Michael J.
Wow, this did not turn out the way I thought it was going to.
Oh, yeah? How were you expecting it to?
I mean, I did
This War of the Spark start. Yeah, this War of the Spark action.
I did not imagine, like, 3 of the top 4 decks in the first big event to be just straight mono-red aggro, some of which with almost no new cards.
Yeah, I mean, at the very least, everybody has Tibalt. A couple copies of Tibalt, Rakish Instigator, in their sideboard against life gain. But other than that, I mean, Ethan, Gaiske, and Collins Mullen were both they were both no other changes, right? Like they were both just straight up. With Ethan's list being, and these are second place, Collins Mullins was Risk Factor main Experimental Frenzy in the board, whereas Gaiske was Experimental Frenzy main with Risk Factor in the board. However, both were felled, so to speak, or topped, I suppose, by William Polium, who did have one other change besides Tibalt. Well, Polium does have those risk factors in the sideboard. Instead of Experimental Frenzy, he went with Chandra. 4 copies of Chandra, Fire Artesian.
So I actually think that there is a couple of if you're a red deck nerd, like I happen to be, I think that there are a couple of things that are meaningful changes in Will Polium's deck, especially relative to the second and third place decks. Among other things, he's playing 20 lands. So this is whack that the 20 land deck is actually the mana heavy deck. But,
got to cast those 4-drops.
It wasn't so long ago that 22 lands main deck was the amount that you'd play in this shell. But yeah, so 4 copies of Chandra. Love it. Will actually, he said in just off to the side that he would have liked to have an Experimental Frenzy somewhere. I actually think that one Experimental Frenzy would be great in this 75, possibly in this 60, because you can't brick wall on multiple frenzies if you're only playing one.
Yeah, I was going to say, what do you think of just 3 Chandra, 1 Frenzy?
I'm not sure that I think I like it more than 4 Chandra. I'm not sure it's the right number, but I do think I like it more than 4 Chandra.
Sure. And can you walk us through what you like so much about Chandra compared to Experimental Frenzy?
Yeah, so a couple of things here. Just one other change before I go into that, though. You'll notice that Will played 2 copies of Skewer the Critics and 2 copies of Wizard's Lightning, which is a somewhat unusual change. People were kind of heavier on Skewer the Critics right after the second set came out. And then a lot of people have been at 4 Wizards Lightning, no Skewer the Critics in the standard versions for a while. But with this setup, which is, Vishino Pyromancer to set up, just getting Hasters in with the 1-drops, I do think that there's some value to Skewer the Critics. And also the Wizards Lightning kind of decreases how bad your bad draws can be. Because, if you don't have a Wizard, it's a 3 casting cost Lightning Bolt, which is kind of bad. Now, one of the things that you get from playing with Skewer the Critics, though, is it's a great interaction with Chandra. If you're going to remove 7 counters from Chandra and one of the cards that you turn over is Skewer the Critics, then you've already catalyzed the discount on it, which I think that's an underrated combo right there. Because it discounts any, if I'm going to go off with Chandra, going off with Skewer the Critics is actually really valuable. Okay, what do I like about Chandra versus Experimental Frenzy? 2 things. Number 1, you just play Chandra, and if you play it if you're tapping out for Experimental Frenzy, you're tapping out for Chandra, typically you're not doing anything in either case, right? In the case of Chandra, on the first turn, you're probably just going to gain a loyalty, right? In the case of Experimental Frenzy, it's only if you're doing it kind of later in the game that you can do any action. But you're not getting much other than a loyalty from Chandra's side on that first turn. Basically nothing on the Frenzy side. Now, Chandra is not getting you a ton of card advantage. In some turns, it's not going to give you anything, right? But the problem is with Frenzy is when Frenzy is good or better, it often feels unbeatable. But when Frenzy is not your friend and it's just all Frenzies on top of your deck, or you have 3 lands in a row, you basically can't win. Now, the other thing about it is if you have Frenzy in play, it becomes extraordinarily difficult to deal with large creatures. So you might even have like a Shock and a Wizard's Lightning or a Lightning Strike and a Skewer the Critics. You can't kill a 5/5 if you have Frenzy in play. And the reason is you can only play the cards on top of your library, and you have to play them in the order that they're on top of your library. So that is an extraordinary drawback to having Frenzy in play. If you end up playing against anybody in like the Lyra Dawnbringer, which is a bad card for red, right? But you could kill it if you had multiple burn spells, but not if you have Frenzy in play. And so, like, one of the things that I really like about this is you're just getting progressive card advantage, never brick walls, and you're always moving forward, and it doesn't lock up your hand, and that's pretty good.
Well, definitely. How much of a factor is the ultimate?
I personally have played a medium amount of Chandra, and I've never actually ultimated Chandra. Like, at the point that I was going to ultimate Chandra, I've usually already won.
Sure.
The thing that I do like about the card in general is many players just either they don't know how like the implications of playing against it, or they're just not going to attack it in general. So it typically just gets big unless you're playing against an opponent with cards specifically like Assassin's Trophy, Vraska's Contempt, things that can destroy or exile a Planeswalker without removing counters. And
it's kind of nice that she can't be mortified, right?
Yep, that's a huge deal. Obviously, Mortify is a pretty good card in Standard because there's so many forecasting cost enchantments you might want to get rid of, including Reclamation, Experimental Frenzy, obviously. There are a lot of other like small things, right? Like a Teferi, for example, is much better against an Experimental Frenzy than it is against a Chandra. And and I think first week
both Teferis.
Yeah, I'm thinking Teferi 3 is the best card in Standard, but we can talk about that in a little bit. It's really
Jeez, that's pretty bold.
It's good.
As far as what I guess just to close on the topic of these red decks. Are you on board with the two Tybalts that they all play? In order to shut down people's life gain.
So I had heard about Tybalts in action, and I don't think it's like super impressive. But if people's sideboard strategy against the red deck is to bring in like a ton of Enter the God Eternals, and then they've always had cards like Moment of Craving, Vraska's Contempt, etc., medium life gain cards, but like really the big life gain cards, I think, like Enter the God Eternals, it does take some of the oomph out of that. I think the fact that they're still getting a 4/4 and taking out your best guy isn't the best,
Yeah, but part of it is that you're still getting, if you play Tybalt and you immediately just get a 1/1 Red Devil, it's actually a little annoying for them to have to deal with. And then, like, you get to make another one and you still just have Tybalt. So, like, he's actually, like, producing a legit amount of board presence.
Yeah, I mean, if Tybalt's text is, like, 3 mana, it has that kind of Sulfuric Vortex action, and you get 2 tokens out of it, it's on the order of a card you would play, right?
Definitely, I think so.
So, yeah, I think it's okay. I'm not a giant fan of this card. I mean, if it's staple in Standard, I could see it. I don't know. This one doesn't seem like it's built to last to me. What I'm more surprised at is how successful all these mono red decks were in getting to the end, especially since they were all risk factor decks. I was more tested.
They're not really all risk factor decks, or you're just saying that they have access to it.
Every one of them has at least 3 risk factors in the 75, if not in the main deck.
Yeah. 2 of them have it in the board. One of them has it in. So
I was actually really thinking more that people would be doing the black splash, even if they have no black spells, just to play Rixmati Reveler. If like your only quote black card is Rixmati Reveler, that's very, very good with either a higher or a lower land count, and it's in particular good if you're going to de-emphasize Experimental Frenzy, because you get a frenzy-like effect for almost free, right? The mana is... It's only if you have to play a Blood Crypt on turn 1 or so that you're really taking that much damage from it. And, mid-game, you just You get a freebie Ancestor Recall type card on your guy. You get a cheap way to filter for lands or get rid of extra lands late, and you have a free way to set up Risk Factor. And I think like if Risk Factor is now becoming the default way to play the red deck in Standard, I'm just really surprised that it's mono.
Can I speak to that?
Of course.
One of the things I don't like about Rixmati is that it exposes you much more to what might be the best card in Standard, Narset, Parter of Veils. You see, so Narset is actually some incredible technology against red. Narset's ability to blank Risk Factor is a real liability because usually Risk Factor is just so good against these control decks, right? But Narset, without even trying, like Narset comes down and draws something good, and then if they can't kill it, and some of their burn doesn't hit it, it's not like they want to be burning it, right? But if they can't kill it, if they can't get Narset off the table, they can't even Risk Factor until they do.
I mean, they certainly can, and they can be taught that that's not something they should do a second time.
Because obviously with Narset in play on the battlefield, Risk Factor, the person can just say, I'm not going to have Risk Factor deal 4 damage to me.
So,
and then you still won't draw any cards.
So counterpoint, which is like,
in Rixmati, incidentally, obviously Rixmati opens you up to even more of that.
Yeah. So counterpoint, I would just say, I agree with that statement. And I think that like, Narset is obviously a consideration in this format, but I would say the thing I'd be differently not more concerned about, just differently concerned about is the way that these red decks is currently structured with Fanatical Firebrand, Viashino Pyromancer, and Runaway Steamkin. They are extraordinarily exposed to Goblin Chain Whirler when on the draw. And if you're not playing a Frenzy deck, Steamkin's kind of bad. It's not, I mean, it's great sometimes, right? I mean, Steamkin used to be like the second highest power card in the deck, but most of these decks are either no Frenzy or Frenzy in the sideboard, or they're way more progressive with Chandra. You're just not getting the value out of Steamkin that you were getting before. And the multiple Steamkin experimental Frenzy stuff is just not going to happen for these decks, especially at the 19 land level that they were happening in previous formats.
Yeah, the thing is that the Steamkin actually lives through Cry of the Carnarium. And I think one of the problems with this red deck, it's not really a problem, it's just I would expect there to be a fair bit of Cry of the Carnarium, and I kind of just don't want to be exposed to it, you know? Yeah,
I mean, here's the thing. When Steamkin lives, I'm not arguing with you, right? Like, Steamkin is incredibly high power. It's a 4/4 for 2 mana that gets you somewhere, right? And if you know the play patterns with it, you're using its mana generation and it's 4/4 again, and all of a sudden it's an outstanding card. But it was an outstanding card, I think, largely to be played in a certain way. And if we're moving away from that way, I just think it's less valuable. And Can we play 2 more Wizards Lightnings and 2 more Skewer the Critics? And what? Instead of the Steamkins. Dude, all I want to play is the deal 3s. Yeah, I mean, probably. Yeah, probably. I have to test that out. That seems all right to me. The worst cards in the deck are the Firebrand and the Pyromancer. Like, they're very bad if you're playing the mirror and you're on the draw, and they're very bad in sideboarded games against the mid-range decks. Like, any matchup where your opponent could have, like, an Oath of Kaya, you just don't want a Viashino Pyromancer in your 60. Like, it's so bad. True. I can see that. It's really bad. Like, it's... I can imagine. So, I don't know. So speaking of Oath of... I was going to say, speaking of Oath of Kaya definitely delivered this week. So Esper Control overperformed. It was a popular deck and still performed quite well. One of the 2 Esper decks in the top 8 actually even had so one of them had the Oath of Kaya in the sideboard, but one of them actually had a main deck. Edgar Magalhaes had
2 Oath of Kaya to go along with 4 Teferi Hero of Dominaria and 2 Teferi Time Raveler. What do you think?
So I'm really, really, really interested in the Esper decks in Standard right now. I'll tell you why in a couple of minutes, but I just went and invested in all of the in all the Esper cards about a day ago. But I invested in Teferi Time Raveler about 24 hours too late, I think. It was $2 on Friday. It was about $20 when I bought it. So, it was only a rare, but then people saw what it was doing to Wilderness Reclamation decks. I'm not sure if I like the pure control take on the Esper decks versus what Star City is calling the mid-range decks, or the hero decks. And I think that there are incentives to both, and they have such a huge amount of overlap in cards. It's just where those cards are distributed between main deck and sideboard.
What is it you like so much about the ones with all the creatures?
Well, so I have an inherent bias on this. So 11th place was Roman Fusco, who's kind of my protege, and he was calling me every round. He lost the last round to the Selesnya deck to miss top 8. This build, which is a week 1 build, is woefully bad. The 11th place deck against a go wide deck. There is literally one time wipe in the 75 if you're trying to deal with more than one creature at a time. Now, the thing that I like about the deck is that if your objective is to generate material and generate some forward momentum, maybe get some attack on while defending your planeswalkers, this deck is outstanding at that. You can attack for between 1 and 3 points of damage and have sufficient blockers to defend all your planeswalkers every turn, if that's the only thing you want to do. And if you're doing that, you're often going to win, right? It also makes very good use of a lot of the planeswalkers. It's just a very good Sorin deck, for example, right? You can lay Sorin and then immediately buy back a Thief of Sanity that your opponent intelligently shocked.
Yeah, but how many cards do these really have overlapping? Because you're talking about a deck with 20 plus threats, right? But this Esper control deck, it's all cards like Chemister's Insight, Absorb, Kaya's Wrath, and Thought Erasure.
Well, I was thinking about there's Thought Erasure in the creature deck also, but there's Thief of Sanity. It just happens to be in the sideboard of the Esper control deck. So the thing I was thinking about on the mid-range deck versus the control deck is I do think 2 things. One, I'm guessing the control deck is just better, and in part because a lot of the card choices in the mid-range deck are bent around Hero of Precinct 1. So, for example, it just doesn't play Opt. Wouldn't you want to play Opt?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I guess. I mean, Edgar's not playing Opt either. I mean, none of the Esper control decks were playing Opt, right? I mean,
I would want to play Opt.
I don't know. I think Opt's a lot better in a 2-color deck.
Yeah,
it's 3-color deck. Yeah, I don't think I think I would play Opt. Maybe I would, but I don't know. Maybe it depends. I would play Opt if I was built around Kefnet. That's enough to get me to play Opt.
Yeah, I mean, I like Kefnet. You really, really, convinced me on a lot of Kefnet's points. But I think that one of the cards that either of these decks could be playing that neither of them are currently emphasizing, and I mean, you could play it as a 4 of even, might be Saheeli. Saheeli doesn't actually. I
don't know. That sounds crazy to me.
Mana, does it? Really?
No, not at all. No, it doesn't require you at all. I think Saheeli's fine, but to play it as a 4 of in a reactive deck like this, it seems crazy to me.
I don't know. I think it's a good finisher. I mean, I'm
not saying it's not a good finisher. I'm just saying that
format is young.
Yeah, but these decks are so reactive. You can get stuck so easily with so many cards you can't play. I think Saheeli, you really want to be more proactive. You want to be because every Mortify, every Dovin's Veto,
yeah,
it's just so not what's going on with Saheeli.
So you just can't trigger her, you're saying?
Right. Yeah, I want to play Saheeli in a deck full of Lightning Strikes or Ops or Anticipate or just cards I can just play, where I can just keep playing all my cards.
So you were saying you think Narset might be the best card in the format?
No, that's only if you think Teferi is.
Oh, well, I mean, I was just saying Edgar doesn't even have Narset in 75. I think Teferi is unbelievable. 3 casting cost Teferi. Like, there was the biggest thing to me. I mean, this is one's like in giant pink neon lights, is the fact that like pink Wilderness Reclamation.
The neon lights are pink, huh?
Yeah, they're pink neon lights, right? All right, they're bright green neon lights in this.
No, it's fine. It could be pink. I'm just curious if the visible light spectrum is capable of. Anyway, keep going.
Okay, so Wilderness Reclamation, right? A really powerful card. One of the main defining cards that was driving one of the main defining new strategies last set, right? It's not that Teferi Time Raveler completely shuts down Wilderness Reclamation, but it shuts down a lot of the mischief you can do with that card, right?
It is incredible in that matchup.
Like, you're at a minimum, like, I mean, you're not making it so they can't do anything, right? If they want to do stuff like activate a land or like grow a growth chamber guardian, they can do some of that stuff, but there ain't no, gigantic expansion explosions happening during their end step or all these chaining time walks. That's not going to happen anymore. And just for that, I'm just like, well, that's just an extra that you get on this, aside from all the rest of the text.
It's not even just the big ones. Even just the fact that they can't Chemister's Insight with their Wilderness Reclamation. Because it's not just about the cards that cost oodles. It's also that if they Chemister's Insight during their main phase, great, no problem. But then when they untap, it's not like they can do anything anyway.
Yeah, it's just all the extra sinks that they normally would be getting that are like virtual.
Well, you're countering the best card in their deck. Like you're incidentally. Plus, he does everything else he does.
Yeah. That's just his extra text. Like he still has other abilities, right? So, and I guess it depends on matchup, right? Like Teferi Time Raveler is not particularly good against Boros, right? Like, in fact, he's probably dead before doing 2 things against Boros. But if you're playing against like,
I don't think he's very good against red.
I think that he's okay against red. I think he's not the best. I agree. But he's fantastic.
He's not unplayable. He's fine, I guess. He's not good, but he's okay.
Unbelievable in the Esper Mirror, especially if they're a version with Absorb.
Yeah, he's really good there.
So I really like him, and I think like there's just new play patterns that are going to be available that...
Is he better or worse than Narset in the mirror?
In the mirror?
Mm-hmm.
I think better.
I think worse. I don't know. Could be better. My confidence isn't that high. Narset seems really good.
Well, the fact that neither deck can very easily destroy the other one's like Planeswalker, even if it has like one loyalty.
Maybe.
It's not easy. You can't despark either of them.
It's just that, like, if Teferi's sitting in play, I guess it depends on how much of this permission you play, though, right? Because, like, obviously, like, on the play, it shuts off Absorb, right? But it's not like it stops Dovin's veto, right? And, of course, they could just have Vraska's Contempt, right? But, like, I guess on balance, it is true that Oath of Kaya is, like, great against Narset in a way that it is not against Teferi. But I just think about how much you could just put down Teferi and it might just not even do anything.
In the mirror?
Right? Like, no, it might not. Right? Like for instance, these decks only have 6 counterspells. Right? You could just, like, Zach Allen's deck has 4 Vraska's Contempts.
Yeah, but I think, like...
So Zach Allen's got 2 Narset and 4 copies of Vraska's Contempt. If Zach Allen puts down Narset, I mean, Oath of Kaya, I guess, is an out, but I mean, it's actually really disruptive, right? Like, it shuts off Edgar's 4 Chemister's Insights. It demands answer from Teferi, and anybody foolish enough to opt during their main phase is in for Rude Awakening. But the big thing is that Narset just digs so hard. I don't know. I like a mixture. I do think a mixture is really good. But, like, I don't know. I guess maybe I've been playing too much Grixis, but I guess I just don't fear being locked under Teferi, so to speak, so much.
See, I actually think that it's not that Teferi is forever going to be like such a warper, and I think that some people have been talking about Narset as being just like this inherent warper of the format, but I think that especially the control-ish decks are just going to change how they approach game one. So maybe we'll see fewer permission cards and more like hand disruption cards.
Well, I think we should see more hand disruption cards anyway. I think the hand disruption cards just play so well with both of the threes, both of the Planeswalkers on 3, in terms of just setting them up.
Oh, for and against, actually, right?
Yeah, both. That's what I'm saying. Like it's hard to be sure you can counter the other person's 3-cost Planeswalker when you know they have access to so much discard. Plus, I think like using Narset, and how much I think everybody else should be using Narset also, I think that sort of speaks a little bit to why we see stuff like Zach Allen only playing 2 Chemister's Insights, because he got the memo about Narset.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that he has Narset himself, the presence of that Narset is actually balancing the Chemister's Insights only being 2, right? Like he just gets some of that action from the Narset itself.
Yep.
Yeah,
I like the Teferi Time Ravelers too. Although honestly, I could see playing both main deck.
Oh, I think. I mean, like when we were just bouncing off, like if you look at Roman's deck, for example, the 11th place deck, he had 3 copies of Teferi in the main deck, of Teferi Time Raveler and a Narset in the main deck, for example.
Yeah, that's okay. I think I'd be more inclined to a 2-2 split. But I think it's weird because I'd rather have 1 Narset than 1 Teferi, but I'd rather have the 3rd Teferi than the 3rd Narset.
In this deck, I mean, this is a special case, but he's getting value out of Hero Precinct 1 on one of those cards and not on the other one.
Well, yeah, then I don't think I don't even know if you play Narset if you're not. I guess it's just such a great.
He said it was very
hate
good
card too. Yeah, it's such a great hate card. The mono red equity is just what really won me over on Narset.
Yeah, it's really it's one of those things. It's like the Teferi equity against Simic, right? Like it's just extra, right? Like you get their extra stuff. But if they're playing Experimental Frenzy or Chandra as their card advantage engines, you're mitigating a lot of that. So it hurts the risk factors, obviously, but or if you're going to play Rexmati, but not so much the other jazz.
So what do you think of Ugin the Ineffable?
I don't have a real stiff opinion of this card. I mean, I see it coming up in a lot of decks, and I don't know. It seems like I don't know. I kind of don't know when I want to do either ability, right?
Well, I don't know. It's a lot like Liliana Dreadhorde General, right?
Well,
it's just good.
I don't know. Passively, it seems weaker to me, right? So when I
Why?
Well,
in a deck with no creatures,
the first ability is like a non-ability in this deck, right?
Yeah, counted as a non-ability.
Right. So if you compare that to
but Liliana's a non-ability too.
No, it makes creatures.
No, but Ugin's creatures draw a card when they die.
Yeah, I guess you're calling it a wash.
Thing.
All right.
Yeah. I mean, it's like there are literally no creatures in this build except for the tokens made by Liliana. When they die, they draw you a card only if Liliana's still in play, whereas the Ugin tokens draw you a card regardless of whether Ugin is still in play. It's actually slight edge Ugin.
All right.
In a deck that has no other creatures.
I guess.
I mean, there's Enter the God Eternals, Enter the God Eternal and Thief of Sanity in the sideboard. But again, you only draw cards off of those when they die, when Liliana's still on the table. Whereas Ugins are going to still draw you the card whenever.
And Zach's only got 1 copy of Liliana in the main deck. It's not like this is a heavy Liliana deck.
Yeah. You also know what you're going to draw from Ugin before you draw it, right? Like it's... like you get to look at it, and that's different. Liliana, you don't know what you're going to get. The reason that you main deck the Liliana is that Liliana's -3 is such a -4 is such a great option. You see, like when you're playing a Kaya's Wrath deck, or a lot of other decks for that matter, the ability to punish, like 2 is such the number of threats that people are often going to be trying to commit, right? Because if they only play 1 and you kill it, they've lost the turn. But if they play their whole hand, you get them with the Wrath. So like Liliana's -4 ability is just so good here. The thing about Ugin in the sideboard is that I think having 1 Liliana, 1 Ugin is just good diversifying your threats anyway. But also there's this extra option because not everybody do you want a -4 against. There's some people, like they're playing take Selesnya for instance. You're not going to get your money's worth out of Liliana against a Selesnya deck, whereas Ugin can come down and actually just destroy a enemy planeswalker.
Like the Great-Hearted.
Right. Or it can just go after an Ixalan's Binding on your Teferi or whatever, right? Like, I think that the extra flexibility, the extra option from Ugin is just much appreciated after sideboarding specifically.
I'll have to noodle on this more. I think you do make some good arguments, but I don't know. I'm not super in love with him.
No, neither am I. But I think he's a fine option, and I like him better than the second Liliana in Esper specifically. I think decks that are playing Teferi are more vulnerable to things like Ixalan's Binding, whereas if you're playing like some Grixis deck and you just incidentally have like 17 different copies of Bolas and
eight Bolas main.
Right, and who knows what other kind of cards, then who cares?
So here's my fail state thought on Ugin the Ineffable, which I never thought about it like this. If you think about it like a Desert Twister, right? We were talking about Desert Twisters 2 weeks ago. 6 mana, comes down on your main phase, and you could just take out probably your opponent's best permanent as long as it's not a land or, a colorless card.
Or Karn. Right?
Yeah, as long as it's not that, you pretty much Twister it, and then you've still got a Planeswalker that might be getting you some card advantage later if they don't deal with it. That's pretty
really good. Immediately, I mean, you start getting these 2/2s that if they die, draw you a card.
That's a more than solid. That's a more than solid
it's like a much stronger board. It's like a meaningfully bigger board impact than Vraska 6, right? Like the tokens you're getting are better than Vraska's tokens, and you don't get the treasure win from using the minus ability, but like you can hit a wider range of things, and besides, this deck doesn't have access to green, and Vraska Relic Seeker has historically been a great card. Now you don't get an ultimate, and I actually like Vraska's ultimate, but
I think Vraska's ultimate I lose to that ultimate all the time.
I win with it all the time.
Terrifying.
It's great.
Yeah, so Ugin doesn't have one of those, instead has kind of a non-ability. But it's okay. It still has this Desert Twister action that I can live with.
Well, if you ever just bust out the Sorcerer's Spyglass, though, like that's kind of a nice move. You're just like, boom, gotcha.
I was thinking of dusting off this red-white Planeswalker idea I had like 2 years ago. With you could play a lot of like treasure maps and that kind of stuff, right? There's a lot of like 2 casting cost artifacts that get you some incidental advantage from.
Why are you playing 2 colors instead of 3?
Whatever it is, But
I think if you're going to do a Planeswalker deck like that, you don't want to just stay straight Boros. Like, I just don't see why you wouldn't pick up either Oath of Kaya, or all these incredible blue Planeswalkers.
Yeah, so I was just kind of thinking like, what's the one that it's like it searches for basic lands and then flips into a Maze of Ith? Like that's another card that you're getting.
You always want that card, man.
It's free in this deck.
No, it's not. You have to spend mana on it.
You mean to use it?
Yeah. Dude, don't you want to just spend your turns playing dope Planeswalkers?
Like I already said that I was in for Ugin the Ineffable. How dope can my Planeswalkers be?
Sarkhan is dope.
Sarkhan is dope. Any Sarkhan
is
you want.
Incredible. Sarkhan 5, the new Sarkhan, is incredible. The card is super, super, super good.
I finished the book War of the Spark today. Got that one.
No spoilers. No spoilers. Did you enjoy it though?
I very much gleefully liked it. On the other hand, it's weird to me, like, because they treat Ravnica like a city.
You don't know how to not spoil this, do you?
All right, never mind. Yes, I enjoyed it. I didn't stop. I started on, I don't remember, the beginning of the month, and I'm, what is it, like the 6th? I'm done already. The 7th?
The 9th.
It's
if you're listening to the show.
Oh, yeah. Well, we're recording.
So, Obnixlus's Cruelty in the sideboard. What do you think about this one? The -5, it's 2B, instant, -5 until on a turn. If that creature would die this turn, exile it instead.
I'm not a big fan of that card.
So, like, it does kill the Phoenix.
Yeah, so? What do you want me to say? Like, it's not... I don't like it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just...
I mean, like... Can't you do other things that will kill a Phoenix? Like a D-Spark would kill a Phoenix, right?
I'm just saying, man. Okay, if you -5, the Hydroid Crassus, they can't find finality at back.
Okay. I'm not.
So speaking of D-Spark, what do you think of D-Spark, man?
Love it.
Really?
Yeah, I love it. I don't
What do you love about it?
I love its applicability. It's
okay, how about this? How do you like it against Search for Azcanta, Oath of Kaya, Teferi Time Reveler, Thief of Sanity, Narset, Parter of Veils, or any other card in this matchup?
It's really bad against the cards that you named. When I say I love it along the lines of loving Disdainful Stroke. It's very similar to Disdainful Stroke.
No, it doesn't counter the spell.
But when I'm thinking about this in the context of like a hero deck. The hero deck is going to get a little...
Dude, the hero deck is not the first, second, third, fourth, or fifth deck of the format. That's not what's going on, man.
It's within the top 5. Come on.
Really?
All right. Mono red, Esper Control. What do you have at third? Selesnya tokens?
Simic Nexus.
Simic Nexus third? I don't know. I think Simic Nexus is going to take a beating from these blue-white decks.
I'll tell you what, though. I have to give it 5th.
I think it's in the top 5.
Because I think Bant is better than it. But, like, I think beyond Bant, Esper Control, Mono Red, and Nexus... I guess Feather, if somebody cracks the code. But I think the Feather decks people are playing are missing something.
Yeah,
there was a sweet Feather deck actually that I don't know if you saw this one that Splash Blue for Dive Down. It's like so the primary payoffs are the same payoffs as just like the Boros style. It's just 10th District Legionnaire, Feather the Redeemed, and Dreadhorde Arcanist. Obviously, Dreadhorde Arcanist, awesome card for all these cheap 1 and 2 cost threats that the Boros deck is playing.
Yeah,
or just
if you get rolling, it's going to roll you, right? Like that's the thing.
It even is a 1/3, so it even lives through the Reckless Rage, which is kind of nice.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, and Dive Down is pretty exciting with just. You know, the combination of having both Dive Down and Sheltering Light, so you just have so many different ways to make your creatures live. And then something I thought was really kind of interesting, I don't know how to feel about it yet, but Gird for Battle. A couple copies of Gird for Battle. It's the white sorcery, put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures. So you get to trigger both. Like what you do is you go turn 2 Arcanist, and then turn 3, you play the 10th District Legionnaire, and then you immediately Gird for Battle it. And the Gird is going to bring it up to a 3/3, and the trigger is going to get it up to a 4/4, and your Dreadhorde is a 2/4, so you're attacking for 6, and then when the Dreadhorde connects, it gets to play the Gird for Battle for free. So then you're going to get another 3+3+3 worth of action because the 10th District Legionnaire is doing it again. So then what you end up with is 9/11 worth of stats and a couple scouts on turn 3. Plus, you've already hit your opponent for 6.
That's pretty exciting.
And that's just like some normal stuff happening. It's just if you draw 10th Dreadhorde Arcanist and 10th District Legionnaire, you can do pretty dope stuff with some of the other cards too. But
you're talking about Jason Reed's 63rd place deck, right?
Yeah. And actually this deck's been showing up on Mitgo a little bit as well. I think they're missing something, but I don't know what it is yet.
It has the inherent problem a lot of the heroic style decks have, which is that like they're got like a lot of pump spells, but they got to keep a guy in play. If you're tapped out, like it doesn't matter how many dive downs you have, right? They're killing your guy, and I think that's a potential problem. Gideon is only a creature sometimes, right? So you can't. Gideon always is. Well, he can't block, but he's always a creature on your turn. No, but on their turn, he's not. They can get him, and you can't protect him with those kind of techniques if it's their turn.
Good point.
So I do think that this deck is like totally capable of like ruining a lot of days, and I think that I just think that it's so cute that there's Chart a Course in this deck. Like, how cute is that? But I think you're right. Like it's got some very, very, very broad issues.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I think that whole there's 19 threats and 19 pump spells thing. It reminds me of those red-green energy decks from days gone by. The like all-in pump spell ones.
Yeah. But that deck could at least just kill you on turn 4. Right, I guess this deck could do a lot of damage. Yeah, I guess you're right.
This deck can do 20. This deck can definitely do 20 by turn 4 with like a normal draw.
The thing is, like, a Danto Vanguard is like, it's just kind of not the right room for it. Like, that card is absurd in some matchups, and it is very bad against mono red, and it is not particularly good against Esper.
Yeah, I don't love the Adanto Vanguard here. It's a fine card, obviously, but I would hope that we could do better.
Yeah, I mean, if the control deck of the format was Jeskai instead of Esper, Adanto Vanguard would be great. But this card is very bad against, like, Goblin Chain Whirler.
So you mentioned Selesnya tokens that knocked out 11th place, but Zachary Keen's Selesnya tokens deck, very, very little new, but does feature Gideon Blackblade here. What do you think of Gideon in a Selesnya tokens deck?
I think it's just really good, and it's a really durable threat that complements the problems that Selesnya typically has, right? Like, the big problem with this deck is, I mean, I guess you have March of the Multitudes, but that becomes less impactful against a control opponent who's playing Teferi Time Raveler. Like, basically,
good point. I hadn't thought about that. That's good.
You play guys, they kill guys. Like, that's how a lot of the matchup goes. And so if you have a card like Gideon Blackblade, which is durable through typical removal types, then the game changes a little bit. So otherwise, you could just be like, I drew 3 History of Benalias. I'm going to rush you out. And they're like, I'm going to kill all of your History of Benalia tokens with my, Cry of the Carnarium. Like, oh, no, that stinks. Now I do nothing because I only draw 1 card per turn. Go. And then, but if you have Gideon Blackblade in your threat set, you could do something else, including exiling target permanent, which is a pretty good ability.
Mm-hmm.
Also, you could just like have 2 guys, and Gideon just makes one of them, indestructible, right? Like, that's also something which really helps to shore up the problems of the strategy.
Yeah, no, totally agree. Notably, 3 Night of Autumn in the sideboard, along with a couple like Return to Natures, plus Vivian Reed. There's just so many ways in the sideboard to deal with enchantments like Experimental Frenzy. Now, what's interesting is that Prison Realm can go after creatures or planeswalkers, but at the end of the day, it's still just a worse Oblivion Ring, right? Like, you're just getting Scry 1. it is legal, I guess. It's just, I mean, you've already got the 4 Conclave Tribunals. I guess it's just you want more answers to Planeswalkers. But, I mean, I don't know. All this trouble to deal with exiling, I worry that it's the wrong way. Because it's not like that's the right way to fight 3-cost Planeswalkers.
I mean, you got to have something, right? I mean, although this deck is actually pretty good against 3-cost Planeswalkers. Right? You're usually going to have a body in play.
Yeah. It's okay. Maybe. I mean, you'll have a body by turn 3. You might have a body by turn 2.
Yeah,
I just picture
fakers.
I guess, except that like if you play Teferi and bounce their Tithe Taker or their Amara.
Yeah, it's game. Like I got it.
That's what I'm trying to say. This isn't the right way to fight that.
Yeah, that's why I think Gideon Blackblade helps, right? Like if you need to fight Planeswalkers, at least it gives you somebody to attack them with that isn't just completely dominated by their creatures. I mean, not their creatures, everything they're playing. Like a lot of just a regular dude is just utterly dominated by Teferi, Time Raveler, or anything in these decks.
So as much as the green-white deck seems solid, I'm a lot more drawn to the Bant mid-range deck that it was flying under the radar. Only 4 people out of the 100+ in day 2. There's like 116 people in day 2 of the SCG. Only 4 of them even played Bant, but 2 of the 4 people who played the Bant mid-range deck top-8'd with nearly identical lists. So Harlan Firer and Rudy Bricksta were both playing this God Eternal Oketra Bant deck. It's very exciting.
Yes,
and both of these do a really good job of showing off Teferi, Time Raveler, and how much it's not just an Esper control card.
Oh, I mean, this deck can land a second turn Teferi Time Raveler, right? Like that's one of its features. If you start on a breeding pool, for example, go second turn Glacial Fortress. That is super disgusting in some matchups.
Oh, yeah. I think Lana Ralph is just out of control in this deck because it's not even just the Teferi. It's also the fact that even more naturally, it's even easier to go Vivian Champion of the Wilds on turn 2.
Yeah.
Vivian Champion of the Wilds lets you play around other people's permission and sweepers so brutally effectively. But you also can use her as a source of card advantage and a lot of selection. The ability to actually just dig to go find your God Eternal Oketra, super good.
Oh, it's a very, very kind of quietly outstanding card, right? Like unlike a lot of the 3 casting cost Planeswalkers that have one of these kind of significant minus abilities, Vivian can actually just naturally get loyalty back. And that's obviously a really good thing. But then separately, the ability to just play around opponents' reactive cards because of the static ability on Vivian isn't that so cool? You're just second turn Vivian and just now you're just playing an Andrew Cuneo game, even though you have only sorcery speed cards in your deck.
Well, so it actually makes your Frilled Mystics a lot better because normally the only instant speed action you have are these 4 Frilled Mystics. But if you can actually hold Frilled Mystic up, and then if they don't do anything, you can just play Hydroid Crassus. Or, and I particularly like this, you can God Eternal Oketra on your opponent's end step, untap, and then make several tokens before they even get a chance to do something to stall your God Eternal Oketra a few turns.
That's cool.
Because often, if you just play God Eternal Oketra and your opponent Vraska's Contempts it, sure, you got to come back in a couple turns, but you haven't really got anywhere. You actually got the worst of it, right? You spent a mana on more than them, and they gained 2 life. And in general, it's not like the Bant deck wants to just drag the game out. But if you can flash down a God Eternal Oketra at a time, I mean, first of all, your opponent could be okay, they can finally Vraska's Contempt. But if they Vraska's Contempt your Vivian and you respond with God Eternal Oketra, I don't know. There's just there's some positive interactions there.
Oh, absolutely. I think that the fact that you can play Shalai at instant speed is actually pretty good.
Oh yeah, that's a great point.
That's pretty nice, right? Like,
well, and the Lyra Dawnbringers out of the sideboard.
Yeah. But I think just in terms of like just rampant mischief, like instant speed Shalai is like counter that.
Yep. That seems dope. So I think this Bant deck is going to be on the move. I am a buyer of Bant.
This deck looks like it'd be outstanding against mono red anyway, right? Which is
you can just brawl with them. Yeah, you can just brawl with them. You're like, oh, I'll just put. Now, admittedly, I do think it's not as good as it would look on the surface, because if you don't draw Llanowar Ralph, what are you doing on turn 2?
Incubation Druid.
You're playing an Incubation Druid or a Growth Chamber Guardian, and then you're aspiring to trade with a Lightning Strike, but frequently you're going to just get shocked.
I mean, it's horrible if you're on the draw, right? If you're like Incubation Druid and then they're like Chain Whirler in for 4 or whatever, it's disaster.
Well, I mean, the Incubation Druid's not so bad against the Chain Whirler, but like if they can like, I just think if they kill it with tempo, because part of the problem here is that it's not like your turn 3 is that golden against them anyway. If you draw Knight of Autumn, that's incredible, of course, but like
no matter what mode you pick, right?
Right. There's nothing you could do with Knight of Autumn that isn't awesome. I guess +2/+2 is not that good. But if your turn 3 is like Teferi or Vivian, there's a lot of things that don't work out that super, or Deputy of Detention. Like, it's fine, but you really got to start dropping the 4s and 5s before you're real happy. I think that's part of the reason why the sideboard here is so slanted against red, where you've got Baffling End in order to actually legit speed you up. And then you have more Knight of Autumns because they're just so good in that matchup, and you have Lyra Dawnbringer for a Haymaker.
Yeah, I think that the design of this deck is to just, I mean, even if you're saying you aspire to trade with a Lightning Strike, like, trade with anything. Your deck has like probably 4 to 5 more lands than theirs, right? Plus you've got acceleration creatures. You just have way more mana. You just want to like not be dead. Like, if anything you're trading 1 for 1, I think is okay, so that you can just like get God Eternal Oketra down. It's hard to kill. 6 Summonus is hard. And then
it is.
Get something.
Yeah. I think these decks actually need to level up a little bit in the red matchup, because I think that when everything goes smoothly, you've got the tools, but I think it's just you're a little too inconsistent in the first couple turns, because I think these red decks reliably are spending their first 3 turns effectively, and this Bant mid-range deck, it's hit or miss which of the cards you have. Because like if you just draw too many Shalais, God Eternal Oketras, Hydroid Crassusai, and Frilled Mystics, you sure do stumble out the gate. And that's to say nothing of how much you have to play all these shock lands, you know?
Yeah, just one note about God Eternal Oketra also, just not for nothing, it has double strike, which means it's very difficult to kill by stacking combat damage with a burn spell, right? So the only thing you can even do that with is Goblin Chain Whirler. And it's painful.
I don't think that's I don't think it's going to come. I think for the most part it's by the time it gets to that, there's nothing else. Like, it's the red deck is aspiring to sidestep it. I don't think the red deck is like all about I need to kill God Eternal Oketra. I think the red deck is like, I accept that I cannot kill God Eternal Oketra. And sometimes they'll just like Wizard's Lightning plus skewer their critics or something, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that's probably it.
There's a bunch of Nexus of Fate technology, a bunch of this Simic Nexus stuff that I think is worth talking about, because if somebody can crack the code for how to help the Nexus deck overcome some of its weaknesses, some of its previous weaknesses, and some of its newfound weaknesses, I think there's a real opportunity here, because this deck gained some incredible new tools. Right. The loudest of which I think is Tamio, Collector of Tales, which is just absolutely breathtaking in a Simic Nexus deck. Tamio's ability to you can just say Nexus of Fate, right? And so frequently, first of all, it gives you just a ton of looks at more Nexus of Fates. But second of all, every time you Nexus of Fate, it gets shuffled into your deck, increasing the density of Nexus of Fates. And every time you Tamio, even if you miss completely, your deck is 4 cards smaller. So this, like, Tamio lets you actually much, much faster race to the spot of just Nexus of Fate infinitely. And the fact that Tamio has this unlimited regrowth ability, obviously that's like something that's really sweet to do with stuff like, you just want to get back a wilderness reclamation that somebody already destroyed. But I love looping Root Snare. The fact that you can just do this, that buys you so much time against aggressive decks without burn. My problem with this is, problem number one with this is I don't think you have a satisfactory amount of counterplay against red decks. That's one of the reasons why red just dominated this weekend, is that Nexus of Fate was the most popular deck by a very large margin. And because Nexus of Fate was the most popular deck and simultaneously is being built without nobody has good tech for beating mono red yet, the mono red decks just rolled them.
So I'm looking at Tony Norton's 9th place deck, barely out of the top 8, 3 copies of the Tamio you were talking about. Talk to me about this deck. How does it win the game, like, in a fair manner? There's like a Callous Dismissal, which has a mass, but not like a lot of direct ways to win the game, right? Are you just, what? How's the game going to go?
Like, how are you winning?
Yeah.
You win with submission by the other person. Yeah. And if they won't submit, then you Callous Dismissal them out, as long as it takes.
What if? Let's see. I guess you could bounce your own non-land permanent, right? Like, that's it. Callous Dismissal them out.
Yeah. Really, people just they concede. You can deck them anyway.
I mean, it's an arduous process.
Oh, yes, it is. I don't recommend it.
Like, this is a rough matchup with anybody who's got a Cindervines in their deck, right? Like, I guess you have plenty of ways to, like, just interact with the Cindervines if it's the primary source of damage. But it's I don't know, I feel like the ones that had, like, a commence the end game or something, so they can have, like, a decent size attacker while still forwarding their strategy.
Remember, you do get to lock them, right? Like,
no, I get it. Like, you can certainly be in a position where you have Wilderness Reclamation, a flip search for Azcanta, and access to Nexus of Fate.
I don't just mean that. What I mean is that you have regrowths every turn. So, like, you have Sinister Sabotage all of the time. You can Root Snare every turn, in addition to taking as many turns as you want, but you can deck them where you're just discarding Nexus of Fate so that your deck never runs out. And then you just Root Snare all combat so that your opponent can just never win through damage, right? Well, you literally have unlimited Root Snares.
I got it.
And then you have, you still have a Sinister Sabotage that you're just sitting on. So, but at the end of the day, you're really counting on the submission. I do think Blast Zone is like a meaningful upgrade to this deck, though.
Oh, it's cool. I think especially because you can activate that ability to put counters on the Blast Zone multiple times per turn in this deck.
Well, you don't want to do that ability multiple times per turn, but you want to do 2 different abilities. Normally, you would just want to do that ability,
and then,
untap it, and then blow it up. Because normally you're like, I can't put counters on and blow it up in the same turn, but you can with the Reclamation.
That's what I meant.
Yeah. And then Narset, Parter of Veils, another great addition here. And in fact, I think there should be even more. There's one in Tony Norton's list. But I think Narset's just such a great way to dig for Nexus of Fates. And I like it against red, and I like it against blue, you know?
Well, I mean, it's a 3 casting cost card. It's a pretty good way to just dig for Reclamation, right? Or
yeah.
I think like it curves straight up.
I don't know. I don't know if I can like get behind sideboarding Arboreal Grazer.
I was looking at the same. It's a beast allegedly, but it's just like a weirdo monkey to me. Everybody had it though. It was in tons of lists.
Like, well, I assume that it's supposed to be your answer to mono blue, right?
Why? Because it has reach. Okay. I mean, it's medium okay for holding off like all of the red decks 1 and 2 casting cost creatures, while putting you a little bit ahead.
It's turbo wall of wood.
It's like not a good card, right?
No, it's not.
Like they can quote deal with it without much difficulty, but it will like slow down like 2 of their mana. Like that's and it's hard to mana.
Admittedly, if you play against a red deck, it's going to be tough for them to deal with this without losing value.
Yeah.
You already put an extra land into play. Even if they can kill this for 1, it's not like even if they were able to Wizards Lightning this, you still got the best of it.
Everything they do is better than an Arboreal Grazer. So, like, you're morally ahead if you put the land into play.
Yeah. I do like Narset's Reversal, though. Narset's Reversal is... So let's say I go Nexus of Fate.
Yeah.
And then you go Dovin's Veto. Ha, ha, ha. You can't... It's uncounterable counter. And then I'm like, oh, ho, I Narset's Reversal my Nexus of Fate. Now I have a copy of Nexus of Fate from Narset's Reversal, and the original Nexus of Fate goes into my hand. So, like, I've effectively countered your uncounterable counterspell, and I not only drew a card, the card I drew was another Nexus of Fate. And I have another turn to do it.
Yeah, I like that too.
So that seems pretty dope to me.
I guess if I like that, I'm just like my opponents to be miserable. like I don't know. This deck is clearly still a standout. I was just a bit shocked at its complete inability to win in a reasonable way.
Submission, buddy.
Callous dismissal them out is the
no. I think you're. I know it sounds funny, but this isn't some kind of like Brad Nelson just gamble that people will just concede. Tamiyo creates like the use of Tamiyo makes you go extremely infinite a lot faster and more reliable. So I think you might be surprised at how much this game puts you in a complete iron vice grip.
Oh, no. I've played against Simic Nexus. I know what it's like to want to submit. I'm just saying.
I'm not talking about wanting to submit. I'm saying that they've got no cards in their deck and unlimited regrowths, and their deck is nothing but Nexus of Fates, and they can unlimited regrow everything they want, and they can fog forever, and they always have counterspell. That's to say nothing of Callous Dismissal actually getting it over with. I think, it is crazy how fast Tamiyo gets wild. Like, just goes hard. But I don't know. Plus, who knows? At the end of the day, Tamiyo also has this really weak ability.
Yeah.
Your opponent can't make you discard cards or sacrifice permanents. So obviously Nicol Bolas 4 makes you discard a card, and like Thought Scour is like a card people play that's very good in this matchup. So that's pretty dope. But Nicol Bolas, man, he goes over the top. When you use Nicol Bolas 5, it counts as exiling.
One deck I wanted to just finish up on.
Sure.
It's way to 98th place, but I just think might just be worth a look based on some convos that we've had. and maybe it'll be a little bit of fire starter for you, me, some dear listeners. It's Sam Lawrence's 98th place deck. It's listed as 5-color control, but I'm looking at this as like Niv-Mizzet. He's got all the Nivs.
Yeah, I mean, like Niv-Mizzet Reborn, find Niv-Mizzet Perun is a bold statement.
I am in for it. Love it.
Sarkhan Fireblood is absolutely breathtaking alongside Niv-Mizzet Reborn, by the way.
Yeah, you can make colors.
But I mean, Sarkhan Fireblood is outrageous in this deck anyway, just going with either of the two Niv-Mizzets.
I mean, might not want to play Bolus in this deck, like the 4 casting cost Bolus. Like, you could play Bolus with Sarkhan Fireblood and have, like, I don't know, a 2 casting cost reactive spell up.
I don't think I can get into Sailor of Means.
Yeah, I agree. It's weird because the card power in this deck is very high for the most part, and then there's the Sailor of Means.
Yeah. I like a lot of the other stuff going on. I'm not that into Sailor of Means here. It's not even a gold card. I don't know what.
And he's doing what you were talking about. He's just like ignoring Selesnya and Gruul, right? Like, and he has like totally plausible cards you would play. Like Deafening Clarion is my Boros card. You know, Find Finality is my Golgari card. I might never cast Finality, but you know, I can certainly find my awesome guys that you killed.
Well, and you can cast Finality, right? Like with Chromatic Lantern.
Yeah, you can cast anything. He's just not emphasizing it, right?
Definitely, yeah.
Like, I think Bedeck is probably, like, pretty cool, right? Like, I think Bedeck is I think it's just one of the most underrated cards in Standard, just because everyone forgets about Bedeck, right? It's just like, if you just want to kill creatures, it's, like, better than Lightning Strike, right? It's literally better.
Well, it's a little harder to cast, but generally, yeah.
It's a way easier to cast Bedeck in a mono black deck, right? Like, it is harder, right? But, you know...
I do think Bedeck is underrated. I agree with you there. And I think Bedazzle is no joke either.
It's full-on fine.
Maybe. I don't know if it's that fine, but you can make it fine in the right spots. There are some spots where it could be sweet.
All right, let me redefine fine. It's fine insofar that the deck got a Rakdos card it could play, right? And it's bedecking most of the time, and sometimes it has this alternate ability that's way better than not having a card.
Totally.
Although I guess Bedeck is just giant growth sometimes, right? Swing with Niv. Giant growth.
There it's kind of like doing Lightning Strike duty too.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think that we could, for instance, are we sure that we really use Connive Concoct? Maybe. I mean, you have to really be in for the whole I want to rebuy my Niv-Mizzet thing, right?
I mean, I have a hard time imagining that I would want the first Connive Concoct before I had the third Thought Erasure.
That was exactly where I was looking.
Like, I think Thought Erasure is better than Discovery Dispersal, and I would not leave home without 4 Discovery Dispersal, so...
Oh, I don't know. I could be talked off of 4 Discovery Dispersals, but I would want to be on Thought Erasure. I also think I might just stay away from Tyrant Scorn.
Really?
I guess it's okay, but it's just I kind of want to use.
Guy.
I guess it's okay. I guess I could bounce my own Niv-Mizzet. I guess. Yeah. I don't know.
It's weird that he's killing Blackblade in this picture, right? Like, you know, he's like breaking Blackblade and killing Gideon.
Dude, you are incapable of not spoiling.
Patrick. It is the picture. I'm not telling you about the story. That's what he's doing in the picture.
4 Unmoored Ego is like a lot.
Yeah.
Like, there's just no 2 ways about it.
What number of Unmoored Ego isn't a lot? Like, is 1 a lot?
Not. 3 is not a lot. No, 0 is not a lot. I mean, Sailor of Means 2, 3, and 4 in the sideboard. This is serious Sailor of Means.
Smells like I lost a bet.
Nah. Dude, Sailor of Means is better than half the cheap blue creatures you've ever played.
It's 3.
Yeah, so was Gnarled Mass.
Gnarled Mass can't even get past this guy.
Oh, no. Sailor of Means definitely great in the Gnarled Mass metagame.
It holds up against Gnarled Mass and draws a kind of a card.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I agree. This is a sweet deck.
Yeah, I just think that, like, you know, I was like a little down on Niv-Mizzet Reborn for like a lot of time, but I think this card might have not just legs, but wings and horns and fangs, man.
I want to know where are the like Aliantrazis and Shaheens. Like, let's get some people making some Niv-Mizzet Reborn control decks, man. The time is now.
Yeah, I want to draw 10 cards now, I guess.
Dude, I think if you draw 4 or 5, you'll be happy.
Yeah, I mean, like, would you be unhappy if you just like paid 5 mana, had a 6/6, and drew 2 very good cards? Like,
no, but I'm pretty freaking happy.
Yeah.
Just in, you know.
Like, if you got like a Deafening Clarion and a Thought Erasure, like, how unhappy are you going to be with that Niv-Mizzet?
No, I'm peaceful, accepting, just real positive.
All right, well, you know who's not, peaceful and accepting? Sarkhan.
Bolas? Sarkhan.
His blood is full of fire, and he's just spitting dragons out, and they're not the nice kind of dragons, as far as I can tell.
I don't know. They seem kind of nice to me. All right, man. I'll see you next week.
All right, bye.
Life didn't work so great. Tried to play Dredge, so jailer hate. Ghostly prison waiting for my untapped phase. Your core trapped in amber stasis state. Lost a lot of friends.